Hello and welcome to another IELTS video. Today we are looking at the results of the speaking contest that I held from my blog last week. If you find this video helpful, I encourage you to visit my blog at IELTS.com, the IELTS related chat website, IELTS-chat.com, and the online ESL Classifieds website, eslmeet.com. There were 6 people that entered last week's contest. 1 from the Czech Republic, 2 from India, 1 from Japan, 1 from Uzbekistan, and 1 from Vietnam. And I would like to personally thank them for their bravery in sending recordings of their voices for us to analyze today. So I hope everybody can keep in mind that this is only supposed to be a helpful lesson. I hope that nobody feels embarrassed regarding the comments that we make about them, because we're all here just to learn and improve our language skills and ultimately our mark on the IELTS examination. Before we begin, I should state clearly that I am not an IELTS examiner, nor am I associated with the British Council, IDP Australia, nor the ESL group at the University of Cambridge. So the following are just my comments based on my experience as an IELTS instructor and as a native speaker of English. So now, without further ado, let's get started. I should explain how I went about gauging the various levels of these speakers, and I did so using the IELTS Speaking Band Descriptors chart. This is the public version that is made available from the IELTS.org website. And you can download it for yourself there, and I hope you do and use it while watching this video. Now let's just zoom in here and I'll explain a little bit about how this chart works. So basically what you can see on the left-hand side is a column for the band of these various topics to be assessed. So the band starts at 9 and of course goes all the way down to 0. There are 4 broad categories that are assessed in this chart. The first is fluency and coherence, which is basically a measure of how fluent and how easily understood the student is when speaking English. The second column is lexical resources, which refers to the word choice and choice of phrases that the speaker uses to express themselves and to speak about the different topics that they do. Third is grammatical range and accuracy. And finally, the fourth is pronunciation. So in assessing these students, I tried to stick as closely to this chart as I possibly could, and I hope that the following is a fairly accurate representation of what these students, what mark these students would achieve on the examination. All 6 students responded to the same cue card and delivered a monologue that was not to exceed 2 minutes in length. And the cue card that I posted to my blog and that the students responded to is this: describe a public place that you like. Please say, where is this place? When do you go there? Why do you go there? What do you like about this place? Okay. And the students responded to this and sent me their MP3 files. Now, today I will present them in the order that they were received by me. So the order is a little bit random. We're not going based on skill, but rather I hope that as you listen, you can also, look at the IELTS speaking band descriptors chart and also try to pinpoint where these students would place in the various areas to kind of, strengthen your understanding of how certain parts of a person's speech can increase their score on the exam. So let's listen to the first recording. This is from our friend in the Czech Republic, and I'll play it for you here.
The place I have chosen to talk about is a beautiful sandy beach near my house. The beach is about 1 kilometer long in the northern of Dublin. This beach is very popular for jogging or also for water activity as a kite surfing. Because the beach is nearby my place, I can go there anytime during whole year. One of the reasons I like spending time on this beach is a splendid view on the sea and the harbor. It is also a wonderful place for me to relax and charge my energy.
Okay. So now this person's speaking is, as you can hear, is quite fluent, and I think that they describe all 4 sections of this cue card well. So if we just go over, some of the different areas that that they could improve upon. So firstly, you might have picked up on there were a few small grammatical issues as they were speaking. So, for example, at the very beginning, they had mentioned this beach is 1 kilometers from their house, which, of course, that's a plural, and we're talking about something singular. So this should be 1 kilometer. And as well, there is, a modest misuse of articles in the students speaking. And I think that this is kind of a trait for a lot of people, that are of Slavic, language backgrounds. So, often when they speak, because their own native language does not have words like a and an and the, that sometimes they tend to use these words incorrectly. And I think we see a few examples of that in the students speaking here. So they had mentioned in the northern part of, or in the in the northern part of something. I think that there was a missing article there. I can go there anytime during whole year. That should be during the whole year. And another example was, it is also wonderful place for me to relax. So here we should be saying, it is also a wonderful place for me to relax. But these small errors, they don't hurt the students, the ability for us as listeners to understand the student. So basically the coherence level of the student speaking is quite good. I've just noted here, so most of her speaking is quite coherent. She mentioned something popular for jogging, and then a word, I think it's as in kite surfing, but I'm not sure. There might have been a slight misuse of that word too. I couldn't quite make that out. And then there was one of the reasons I like spending time on this beach, a splendid view on the sea. So again, we understand what this person is saying, but this should be, one of the reasons I like spending time on this beach is it has a splendid view of the sea. just to clarify it a little bit there. But like I said, though, coherence was quite good, despite these small mistakes. Now, looking at the band chart, I can see very clearly that this student's pronunciation is about a 6 or slightly higher. And I'm looking at if you look in this where it says 6, we have can generally be understood throughout, though mispronunciation of individual words or sounds reduces clarity at times. And I think that that's quite a fitting description for this student's speaking. So for pronunciation, that would be roughly a 6 or perhaps a little bit higher, but around maybe 6, 6.5. Lexical resources. The student's use of words and phrases are pretty good. For most things, they use appropriate wording, and they do not try to use overcomplicated vocabulary, which is another thing that I think students try to do often in their exams. So they try to use, words that are perhaps too complicated, that they don't use them correctly, or they use them out of context. So in an effort to try to sound perhaps more academic or to try to impress their examiner, they try to use very complicated wordings, and this is just out of context. If you're talking about your favorite place to be, sometimes you don't need to speak in this manner. But this student doesn't do that, so that's good. So there's appropriate wording for most things. Okay, so for this student, I would guess roughly a 6 or perhaps a 6.5 at the highest for their speaking. So thank you for that entry to you. Now let's go on to our second entrant in our contest. This person is from India. And I will play the recording they sent to me for you.
Today I am going to tell you about the public place that I most liked. It is Australia's Sydney Harbour Bridge. It is in the Australia's financial capital, Sydney. This harbour bridge connects the Sydney Central Business District to the Sydney's northern shores. Actually, I went to Australia in 2010 on a work visa, and one weekend I have gone to Opera House, having known the fact that it is one of the world's wonder. But though I have gone for the Opera House, I liked the harbour bridge, which is just nearby it. This is because mainly to the fact that it is an amazing engineering construction which has been constructed about 5 decades back, that is in mid 1930s. What I mostly like about this is it is being constructed by the completely iron rods, and what the other thing that I mostly liked about this bridge is the panoramic views it provides of the Sydney and the other nearby iconic attractions of the Sydney, such as Darling Harbour and Botanical Garden and the Luna Park.
Okay. So, basically, the student in their email to me, they also mentioned that they were speaking in a low voice, which I think really makes it, difficult to understand, a lot of what they are saying. So my comment to the student is that the main problem with their speaking is coherence. They appear to be very fluent, so they're speaking at quite a fast pace, and they don't seem to be pausing to think about what they're going to say next. So I believe their fluency is quite strong, and there is there's almost no hesitation at all in their speaking. They seem to be able to speak without having to pause, so that's good. But the problem is that in the way that they are speaking makes them very difficult to understand. And I honestly, I had to go back and listen to this recording a few times to fully or to the best of my ability comprehend what they were trying to say. So I think that in terms of fluency, this person is they're quite fluent. It sounds like they have been speaking in this manner for many years. But coherence is really, really weak, and I think that there are some areas where it's difficult to even understand what they're saying. So that's a problem that should be addressed. And I think that the student's coherence is affected by their pronunciation. So, for example, they were mentioning things like the harbor, and I at certain points I think their R's roll a little bit. So like harbor, no, they should just say harbor. There was a portion where they mentioned which has been constructed in the something 5 decades back. I'm not sure, what that word or phrase was that they said at that point. But though I have gone for the Opera House, I like further Harbor Bridge, which is just nearby. And, all that part in there talking about the Opera House and the harbor, I was very confused, to be honest. I wasn't, completely sure what the student was saying here. Another thing, they were mentioning something about the completely island, which I'm not sure what that meant. And then also there was a portion where they were talking about the panoramic view of of Sydney. And the student also, a number of times they put an article before Sydney, which is a city, the name of a city. So that's a mistake. We shouldn't be saying the Sydney. Of course, if you're saying the Sydney Opera House, yes, then we would use an article, but otherwise, no. So I think that coherence is really the big thing there. Now, if we talk for a bit about grammar, I think that the difficulty that the listener has in understanding this speaker is more due to their poor pronunciation than due to their grammar or lexical resources. Because when I went back and I listened a few times to this speaker, there, if you listen very, very closely, they use a number of fairly accurate words in their lexical resource as they deliver their monologue. And there were a number of instances where their sentences were fairly grammatically accurate too. So I think that these areas are not really that big of a problem, but I just think that the clarity with which this person speaks needs to improve. Okay, so and another thing, just regarding their lexical resources, the student used a few impressive words like iconic when they were talking about certain things that you can see in Sydney. So I thought that was interesting. Also, panoramic. But unfortunately, I think the pronunciation was a little bit difficult there. So I think that this student would probably get around a 5 overall in their speaking. But as well, the student was speaking in a very low voice. So maybe if they were speaking in their regular voice, that would help. But basically, my comment would be to the student to focus on maybe slowing down the pace of their speaking and really articulating all the different words that they're trying to include in their response, and to focus on improving the coherence of their speaking. So thank you very much to that student for submitting that recording, and good luck with your studies. Now let's go to the third recording, which is also from India. And I'll play that for you now.
Well, I would like to describe to you a public place that I like to visit often, and that place is known as Salam Park. And this is a beautiful park in the center of the city, and It is located at around a distance of 30 kilometers from my house, and it takes me around 30 to 40 minutes to reach there by my own vehicle. And I go there most of the time with my family, and I go there mostly on the weekends, but sometimes I like to go on the weekdays if I can afford to find out time during the weekdays, but that is less often. And I go there just to relax myself, to refresh, because the park is very beautifully built. The entrance of the park is like a castle, and it has many good things to attract children and people of other age groups. Like there are many amusement rides and toy trains and other kinds of fun fun things for people of all ages. And there is a water park in the center of that park. And what I like most about this place is the calm and the serene atmosphere, and the beautiful collection of the flowers. And the park is really well maintained by the government, and you can see a lot of people coming there in the evening time. And I think that is the most attractive thing about this place, that you never feel alone whenever you go there. I like to go there with my family, but sometimes I go there with my friends too.
So overall, I think this student's speaking is pretty good in many ways. So basically, the listener can understand every main point that the speaker is talking about. There are slight misunderstandings that may occur in certain parts, but this does not impede the overall message that the student is imparting to their listener. And I think that the student's pace is quite good as well. So they're not speaking extremely fast. They're not speaking slow. They're not taking long unnatural pauses. They're speaking at a kind of a natural and comfortable speed. So I think that really helps with the fluency and coherence of the overall recording. So I think that's one area where the student is strong. Now, the lexical resources are also pretty good. I'm sure you noticed, though, there was some repetition in certain areas. So the student said, when I go there with my family. I go on the weekends. I go there to relax. There was a lot of go, go, go. So that was kind of that was kind of repetitive. The student also uses the word "and" quite a bit. So and then this, and this, and that's a habit that the student, I'm sure, can easily correct. Now let's talk a bit about the grammar. So there were certain sentences, I'm sure you picked up on some of them too, where the grammar, it hurts the meaning a little bit, makes it a little bit more difficult for us to understand them. So for example, what I like most of all, this place is the calm. When I think what they meant was what I like most of all about this place is the calm, and then whatever, the calm nature of it or something. Or for example, you can see a lot of people coming there in the evening time. And a common mistake that students make is the use of come and the use of go. So often when we use the word come, we're talking about a place that we are in at the moment. So I think that this student would probably be better to describe this using go. So you can see a lot of people going there in the evening time, because when she was doing the recording, I don't think she was sitting in the middle of the park. So this is a different place. So she should be saying they go there. Also, the phrase evening time, typically when we use evening, we don't follow it with time. So you can see a lot of people going there in the evening. Another comment I want to make is that students often use the phrase, you can see a lot of people, or you can see a lot of things. And often we can just replace this with something like there are. So there are a lot of people who go there in the evening. So don't be shy to do this, because sometimes when we use you can see a lot of, it just sounds a little bit awkward. I'm not sure maybe if that's something that's a phrase that's commonly used in this person's native language, but maybe substituting this for there are would be a little bit less awkward. So if we talk about the pronunciation, so the student, some of the student's sentences sound a little bit like questions, and often people with Indian backgrounds will, at the end of their sentences, their tone will go up a little bit, and that can sound a little bit confusing to a native speaker, because it often sort of implies like a question of some kind. So for example, the student said, I feel calm when I go there in the center of the city. If we say our sentences like this, it doesn't sound very native, I guess is the best word. So a way to fix this is, to think about English as in like a stair. So you're going down the stairs as you speak. So I feel calm when I go there in the center of the city, at the end of the sentence. So we're kind of going down the stairs. And then if we're going to ask a question, then our tone would go up. Or if we're connecting two ideas together with a conjunction. So I will go there, or I will stay here. So you can hear me going up in the middle and then coming down at the end. But overall, though, I thought the pronunciation really wasn't that bad. We could understand what she was saying at all times, for the most part. A few little points, though. Be careful with the TH. So when she was saying go there, we don't want to start saying go dare, go dare. No, make that TH nice and clear. Go there, go there. She used the word government at one point, and I felt the V was a little bit unclear. So government. The W for flowers, be careful. Not flowers, it's flowers, flowers. And there was one part where I couldn't pick up. It was amusement rides and something, and it sort of sounded like toiletries, but I wasn't sure what the student was saying. Amusement rides and something. I couldn't pick up on that. Anyways, overall, I would imagine the student would get a 6 or a 6.5 on their exam. And you'll see in the IELTS band descriptors chart, there's a part that mentions may make frequent mistakes with complex structures, though these rarely cause comprehension problems. And I think that sentence is very fitting of this student's response. So, we don't, it's not that we can't understand them, it's just that they make some small mistakes in more complicated sentence structures. So, roughly 6 or 6.5, I would imagine. So thank you very much for sending in that MP3 file to me. Now let's continue on to our next listener, or our next speaker, who is from Japan.
Well, place I like is libraries, especially the library which is located within 5 minutes walk from my house, and it was built about 20 to 25 years ago when my family moved to the city. I was an elementary school student then, and this has been my favorite place since then. I usually go there when I have to study English reading and writing for this examination, IELTS. And there's a small study room there, and it's very quiet, and so it's very convenient for me to concentrate on my study and work. Unlike other municipal libraries, this library provides us with a range of state-of-the-art advanced services, including internet connection via Wi-Fi. So I always bring my laptop there and connect it to the internet and try searching on the web. Searching on the web. This is one of the reasons I like this place very much.
Okay, so listening to this student, I think you can clearly hear that they are quite fluent, and the tone that they use when they're speaking indicates that that perhaps they have interacted with native speakers for quite a period of time. So, in terms of the fluency and coherence that you see on the band indicator chart, this student looks as though they would place at roughly an 8, which is quite high. So you know we can hear and fully understand what the speaker is saying in every part of this response. Now, one thing I want to point out is that this student separates his speech into different topics, and he uses cohesion to link them together, which I think is a sign that his speaking is at another level compared with the speakers that we heard before. So, you know, when I finish talking about fluency, I'll expand a bit on what I mean by his use of cohesion. His pace is very good. He's not too fast. He's not too slow. He takes very healthy pauses. There is no real hesitation in his speaking. The only hesitation that is there is very natural, the kind of hesitation that a native speaker would have as they're, you know, trying to gather their ideas and deliver a message. So I think this is very good. There is some light repetition and correction, so you can hear, you know, towards the end he repeats himself. He has to correct himself in another area, but you know, these things do not distract us as listeners when we listen to him, and so, you know, this would be marked as something more natural, as opposed to something that would be, you know, kind of a mistake in his speaking. So so I think overall, you know, his fluency is quite strong. Now, if we talk about the lexical resources that he uses, I feel these are also quite impressive. You know, in his speaking, he dropped the word municipal, which sounded like it came out quite naturally. He spoke about you know, using a couple different technical terms, and it sounded like he did this with a certain degree of ease. It didn't sound like he was having to think too hard to find the right words to use. Now, I mentioned before that we were going to talk about cohesion. So there was one part in his speaking where he said, "I was an elementary school student then." I was an elementary school student then. And then the word, you know, the use of the word then indicates that he's linking back to an idea that he brought up in a sentence before it, and it gives, you know, it gives the whole piece kind of a feeling like it's working together, as opposed to a number of just sort of start stop sort of sentences. So he's using these little cohesive phrases to kind of make his speech much more fluent, and I think that it comes across quite effectively. Let's see. Again, like some of the other students we've listened to, he doesn't use overly complicated words or words out of context. So all the words that you hear in his response would be words that, you know, a native English speaker would use when they were talking about the same topic. So I think that that's something else that needs to be remembered when we talk about lexical resources, is that he's using you know, appropriate wording to talk about these topics. So that is also quite strong for this individual. Now let's talk about grammar. So the sentence structure that he employs is more advanced than what we heard before. For example, at the beginning he says, "located within 5-minute walk away from my house," which which this came out quite naturally while he was speaking, and it's a phrase that sounds like something a native English speaker would say. The only small mistake was that he forgot to include the article "a," so located within a 5-minute walk from my house. But aside from this, it was it was delivered quite fluently. Most of the sentences, actually the vast majority of his sentences, were without any grammatical error. So there's another thing that marks him as an eight band student. Okay, let's talk about pronunciation. So for one, as you probably noticed, his pronunciation is very clear. There's no real point in the recording when we can't understand what he's saying. He, like we pointed out before, he tries to correct himself at 2 different points, but these corrections weren't anything that confused us as listeners. We were still able to follow what he was saying in his response. So overall, he's very easy to understand. And a comment I want to make about this speaker is that he has a highly developed sense of English intonation. So as we pointed out before, we had one speaker who tended to go up at the end of their sentences, and that made the sentence kind of sound like a question. But if you listen to this individual's response, he tends to go down at the end of his statements, which makes him sound much more like a native English speaker. So this comes across quite nicely in his response, and I think overall, his intonation is very effective, and it sounds like it's coming out quite naturally. It doesn't sound like it's being forced by him. So I think you'll notice that there's quite a difference between this speaker and the speakers that we heard before, and when I look at the chart across the board, I'd say he's about an 8, which is very good. So thank you very much to our friend from Japan for sending in that recording. Now let's listen to a recording sent from a student in Uzbekistan.
And now I'm going to tell you about the park, which is very beautiful and which I like very much. It is situated behind the business center and has no road access, so if you want to go there, you have only to go there on foot. Its location is quite beneficial for me because it's just 20 minutes on foot from my house. I mostly go there on weekends or just at any time when I want to skip this city stress and want to breathe in fresh air. There are several reasons why I like this place. First of all, I'm an avid bird watcher, and the only sound that is heard there is bird song. The second is that the atmosphere is very quite calm, and this place dazzles me with its unspoiled beauty. And of course, the third reason is that I like the picturesque and unpolluted river there, and the water just soothes my mind. Of course, I like this place and enjoy visiting it regularly because of tranquility, peace, and quiet there. And I like the joy of nature. And of course, there is also a unique feature, a meal, which is just, 50 years there, and it makes me feel that I'm not in my hometown, somewhere else and in another time. So it's all in all, it's a great way to relax myself.
I think this student is quite fluent in their speaking. They are able to speak quite quickly, and it sounds as though they aren't having to think for long periods of time to choose the words that they're going to use to express themselves. So fluency is not really a problem for this student. What is a problem is that it sounds as though they have very bad habits that have perhaps gone on for a while and have not been corrected. So the student makes a number of mistakes as they're speaking, but they don't tend to stop, to rephrase what they're saying. They kind of just keep talking, and I think that that's a sign that the student has created some bad habits for themselves. So I hope that that the points that I'm going to share here, the student kind of takes that into consideration and tries to break some of those habits that they've created. So I would imagine for fluency that the student would score somewhere around a 7, perhaps a 6.5. Now, if we talk about the article the student uses the word the to describe a park close to their home. And the interesting thing about the way that they use this article, the, is that they use it to describe a place that the listener has never been to. So, as you know, when you use the word the, this is typically reserved for certain things that both the speaker and listener are familiar with. So, when we talk about, for example, internet, we talk about the internet because everybody knows. We don't say a internet, it's the internet. But here, the student is talking about a park that we don't know. So as listeners, we have never, we don't know this park. We've never been there. So the student would be better to use the word a when they refer to park. At least the first time when they introduce it to us. Now let's talk about the lexical resources that the student uses. So there are a couple words that they use that I thought were impressive. So for example, the student said, "I'm an avid bird watcher," which I thought the word avid was quite well placed. However, at other times, the student tends to kind of crunch their words together. So at one point they said, "The atmosphere is quite calm." And like I said before, this student, it sounds like they like to speak very quickly. And it sounds like, this is kind of a mistake where they try to crush many words together. So we can't say that something is very quite. We can't say very quite calm. We can say very calm, or we can say quite calm, but we wouldn't say the two together. They use some other impressive words like unspoilt and picturesque, but the problem there was that both words were not pronounced very well, so it was difficult to even know that they used those words. I had to go back and listen again to kind of pinpoint exactly what they were saying there. But unspoilt and picturesque were nice little additions to their speaking. There were a couple of problems with modals. So for example, the student said at one point, "You have only go there on foot," which is, it doesn't really make any sense to say it that way. We would say, "You can only get there on foot," or "You can only go there by foot." But we can't say, "You have only go there." That doesn't make any sense. Another part in the recording, the student said, "I must go there on weekends or anytime I want to skip this city stress." Now, of course, the modal "must" indicates something that you have no control over, that it's something that you have to do. So I don't think that the student was trying to say that somebody is forcing them to go to the park. So the word, the word "must" has been used incorrectly here. We would say, "I like to go to the park on the weekend." And in the same sentence, the student said, "Skip. I want to skip this city stress." And here, skip has been used incorrectly. We would probably say, "I want to take a break from the stress of the city." So a couple small lexical resources there. Now let's talk about grammar. I felt the students' grammar, according to our IELTS band descriptors chart, is between a 6 and a 7. So they have many error-free sentences, but there are still quite a few sentences in the response that are grammatically incorrect. So for example, the student said, I enjoy visiting it regularly because of tranquility, peace, and quiet there. So, here, I'm not sure why the student used the word there at the end of this sentence. We already knew they were talking about the park because they used the word it. I enjoy visiting it regularly because of tranquility, peace, and quiet. Now, the sentence itself is sort of phrased awkwardly. We'd probably say, I enjoy visiting it regularly because of its tranquility, peace, and quiet. Or something like, I enjoy visiting it regularly because of the tranquility, peace, and quiet I can find there. Or something like a little bit clearer. Now, there was a point in the response when the student said, it makes me feel I am not in my hometown, somewhere else in another time. And here the student has left out conjunctions to kind of show the relationship between these different ideas. So that sentence should read, it makes me feel I am not in my hometown, but somewhere else or in another time. So to show the relationship, we would need the words but and or. And the last sentence the student shares is, it's a great way to relax myself. And this is a very common mistake where students say things like to relax myself, or to improve myself, or to help myself. These are awkward. We'd probably say something like, it's a great place to relax, or it's a place that relaxes me. Now, if we talk about the student's pronunciation, I think pronunciation is probably the weakest part of this student's speaking. The problem is that the student's pronunciation is so weak at certain points that it hurts our ability. It deters our ability to understand what they're trying to say. So, of course, this is a big problem. So, for example, there was one point where the student said there is also a unique feature and a meal which is just pretty Aris there. And I'm not sure what a meal is. I'm not sure what Aris is. I imagine those are just pronunciation errors that the student is making. So of course, two of those in the same sentence, and we don't really know what the student is talking about. So that those pronunciation errors, of course, that affects the coherence of the entire thing. So that will bring down the fluency and coherence mark as well. So overall, I think the student presents traits of both a 6 and a 7. So I don't think that they are entirely a 7 level, but I also don't think that they are entirely a 6 level. So I would imagine the student would score somewhere around a 6.5 if they were to perform in this way on the examination. So thank you to our friend from Uzbekistan for sending in that recording. Okay, now let's listen to our last contestant in the contest. This is a person from Vietnam.
The public place that I like very much is the park near my house. I often go to this park on the weekend in order to relax, and to get away from the congestion, the noise, the pollution of the civilization and urban areas. I think go into the park is also a good way for me to meet the foreign people, especially the English native speakers, because in my area the tourism is very developed. So go into the park is not only a good way for me to relax, to get away from the civilization, but also to enrich my international relationships and develop my speaking skill. And what I like from this place is the atmosphere of this place and the scenery, the beautiful scenery.
Okay. So now if we start with just talking about the student's overall fluency, I think that you can tell from the recording that fluency is a weak area for the student. So you can hear that the student is pausing at times and trying to think about what they're going to say, and these pauses are unnatural, in their length and the frequency with which they happen. So that's an indicator that this student is perhaps a little bit weaker in their speaking. Also, the student tends to repeat things as they try to correct themselves, and this sort of happens regularly throughout the response. So I think that that's another indicator that the student has some improvement to do there. Now, if you look at the fluency column in your chart, you can see that there's a sentence that reads, usually maintains flow of speech, but uses repetition, self-correction to keep going. And I think that this sentence matches the student's response exactly, and that's at a level 5. So I would imagine the student would get around a 5 for the fluency portion of their mark. Now let's talk about lexical resources. So firstly, the student's lexical resources are actually not that bad. They use a number of impressive words. So they talked about how meeting people can enrich their lives, which I thought was impressive. They also used the phrase "in order to," and they used this, somewhat naturally, which really helped kind of frame what they were talking about. There are, unfortunately, a number of areas where they misuse words. So, for example, they talked about getting away from civilization, but I don't think they quite meant to get away from civilization. I think they meant to get away from the busier parts of the city. So I think that might have been a little bit misleading in the manner, in the way they used the word civilization. Now let's go on to pronunciation. Unfortunately, the student's pronunciation is quite weak. Their pronunciation, unfortunately, causes the listener to misunderstand what they're trying to say. And this, unfortunately will affect the mark that the student will receive for coherence and fluency. So the pronunciation needs to be improved. The student also seems to have some problems with the R sound. So for example, when they were talking about urban, the urban area, urban, we have to hear that R. So I hope the student can work on that a little bit too. There were a couple of suffixes used that were shun suffixes, T-I-O-N. And the confusing thing about these sorts of suffixes is that they are sometimes pronounced differently depending on which word they are coupled with. So the word that I noticed was the word congestion. Now I think the student is saying congestion, which is an incorrect use of this suffix, an incorrect pronunciation of this suffix. When we say the word pollution, yes, that's correct. We would say shun. But here we're talking about congestion. So this, this is an area that might need to be improved, is when to use one sound and not the other. Grammar, again, unfortunately, the student has quite a few problems in this area. The student said, "What I like about this place is the atmosphere of this place." So here we've repeated the subject that we're talking about twice in the same sentence. There are a few article problems. So the student said, in my area, the tourism is very developed. But with the word tourism, we do not use the article the. So we would say, in my area, tourism is very developed. And again, the student said, get away from the civilization. This should just be, get away from civilization. There was an error with a plural as well when the student talked about, I want to develop my speaking skill. We should be saying, I want to develop my speaking skills. So I would think that this student would place somewhere between a 5 and a 6 with this response. So that they present a number of traits that are very similar to a 5, but they also have a few traits that are up towards a 6 level. So I would imagine that with a response like this, the student could expect to get about a 5.5 as their mark. So thank you very much to our friend from Vietnam for sending that in. So that concludes this video regarding the results from last week's essay contest. And I want to thank everybody for sending in their recorded files. I know it takes a lot of bravery to do that and to share your voice with the world. And I hope this video helps you improve in the various areas that I pointed out. So I would like to congratulate our friend from Japan for having the highest speaking mark this time around. And I would like to congratulate all of the speakers for sending in their recordings and allowing me to present them on my blog and in this video. So I hope that video helps to clarify a few different areas on how you can improve your speaking, and I hope to see more of you participate in the contests in the future. Thanks a lot for listening, and have a very nice evening.